All right, we're live. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whatever part of the world you're in. It is evening in Central Time, even though the sun's up. But I mean, daylight savings and all that stuff, whatever it is. Anyway, um, yeah, I was out last week. I had a family emergency. Had to go be with my family, and it was actually refreshing to take some time off. So, a lot of times we don't think about something like taking time off from something that we love to do. I love to do this because I was telling Brian in the studio that I like to ask people, like hear about people's lives, ask them questions and stuff like that, on this show. And so thinking about, oh, I got to take some time, mental health is really important. And, your mental health, your physical health, it's all your spiritual health. It's all tied in together. So if you feel like you need to take some time away from work, you workaholics out there, you need to take your time off. So, that being said, today's episode is all about Mr. Brian Herr. Herr?
Yeah, it's her.
Yeah. And so, little background: Brian and I met in 2007, 14 years ago, summer of 2007, right?
Yeah.
I was trying to think. Yeah, and so we were serving on the worship team during the contemporary service at a deployed location, and this man brought his trumpet with him. And so, like, it was a trumpet or a cornet?
Yeah, no, it was trumpet.
Yeah, it was a trumpet. So it was very interesting because I went on 5 deployments and I served on the worship team on 4 of them. And there was only one deployment where we ever had a horn section, and it was that one. And that was pretty fun. That was very interesting. Like different arrangements and stuff. It's like you don't even think about having a horn section, but that was cool.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been a few years. I'm now fat and retired from the Air Force. But I think people have heard enough about me. So let's just get into your story. So tell everybody where you're from, and what brought you to where you are.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it's a lot. Condense it.
Yeah. So we don't have 10 hours, but so yeah, I'm originally from outside Wichita, Kansas. And I grew up in a kind of the blend of all things wonderful. I grew up just outside of a small town, but we were near a larger town. So I got the country life experience, grew up working on a family farm, but I was always going into the city to do stuff. And so I got to experience all those good things of those different aspects of life. I ended up enlisting in the Kansas Air National Guard when I was 22. So I lived life a little bit. 9/11 happened, and I really wanted to join. I actually tried to join active duty straight out of high school, but due to some injuries, shattered left elbow, torn ACLs, none of the branches would talk to me. Yeah.
So how did that happen? You play football?
I played real football. I played soccer. Yeah.
Oh, whoa. Okay. Them's fighting words.
Yeah. So, I was a pole vaulter in high school. You can't really see it, but, shattered left elbow. But yeah, so ended up joining the military. And like you said, we met on deployment, and, plugging into the worship team was a fantastic way to use my time to invest in others. One of my favorite things was every week just praying over our fellow deployed airmen, especially the ones who were just dealing with life struggles, their wives leaving them, or just the struggles of being away from families. And so just being able to serve in that capacity was phenomenal, to be trusted with that.
One thing I remember about it was my second deployment when we met. It was 2007. One thing I remember is that there was a talent show on the base. And did you go to that one? Do you remember that?
I'm trying to remember it.
So it was in like the theater, right? Where, usually.
I probably didn't. I don't remember that.
But so I remember going because there were a couple of guys in my unit who were playing in that. and it was, you would expect like, oh, okay, people are gonna come showcase their skills, this and that. It was one of the saddest shows that I've ever seen in my life. So like everybody, you're over there, you're away from family. Some people are away for the first time ever. Some people, there was like newlyweds or like new to the military, and then they're overseas and they're missing home, they're missing their family, all the things, right? And so you get a bunch of artists together and they're like, yeah, show us your talent. You have a bunch of musicians and singers. What do you think they're going to do? Sing sad songs. It was awful. I was like, this is terrible. I don't even remember watching the end. I was like, I got to go. This is awful.
Yeah, that is horrible.
It's tough, man, being away from home like that.
Sure. Well, and to all of our fellow veterans who have served overseas, obviously the physical endurance that they go through if they're in a combat situation, forward deployed locations, whatever, that's one level of like challenge that you have to overcome. And regardless if you're in that situation or if you're like where we were, where it's hot and humid and, the desert, we weren't in combat, but the being away from your family is tough. And my wife was pregnant when I was deployed. So, I was constantly worried about like the safety of my wife. And, but the beautiful part was I was able to contact her daily and, just check in on her and stuff. So, it was a blessing.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
So yeah, other than that, so I consider myself kind of a Renaissance man. So I'm a guy who went to college for engineering and business. I worked in a couple different industries. I worked in the aerospace industry, eventually left the aerospace industry, went into industrial food processing, designing machines that make our food. And then I launched my own business in 2018. And I've been, Quanta engineering. Yeah. And I have a ton of fun doing that. My clientele is very broad and, it spans a lot of different industries, but I just get to work with some fantastic people around the Midwest, just solving problems. And then other than that, like my wife and I, we've had some transition in some of our employment work opportunities. So like last year, my wife decided to spin up financial services. So I went through the process of getting licensed. You probably saw some of my posts.
I saw that.
Yeah. So I'm doing that to support my wife so that as she meets with people, I can also help. And so, now I'm kind of starting a new thing. And then, and while I know a lot of the guys you have on here are, post-military, I actually not too long ago rejoined the Kansas Air National Guard.
Man, that's so crazy. I can't even imagine going back.
Well, the good part is I'm going back into a field that is, my intention was to go back in as a civil engineering officer. Yeah. And so right now I'm not in civil engineering, I'm in cyber. And so we'll see how that all pans out. But I'm actually going to be back in your neck of the woods coming up for some training.
Oh,
I'm going to be down at Keesler.
Okay. All right.
So I fully intend on meeting up with you and getting some dinner.
Yeah, let's do it. Definitely. Awesome.
Yeah.
So let's take it back to like when you were in aerospace. Wait. Yeah. Before that? Okay. So when you were in the Guard before, what was your job?
Yeah. So I was a satellite, wideband, and telemetry systems guy. So we call it SATCOM for short.
Yeah.
So basically
it's like, no. I was going to ask you another question, but yeah, go ahead.
No. Well, yeah. So basically, it is any type of communications, long range, right? So it's very similar to radio. I think eventually the Air Force merged radio and SATCOM, and they created kind of one larger umbrella career field. Yeah. But it was I was in an air control squadron. So I was in a unit that was designed to be field deployable. So we everything we had was towable and tactical, and that tactical doesn't mean like Navy SEAL tactical. It means like it's screwed down to the ground, so it's movable. So so it was a really fun really fun enlistment. My unit was fantastic. My leadership was great. I didn't have the experience in the military of always having a gripe about my leadership. I became friends with my leadership. Yeah. In fact, my executive officer in my unit was at a civilian. He worked in aerospace. And so I worked as a civilian in aerospace. And so there were projects where we were working on the same project.
Oh, cool.
And not explicitly peers, but very similar to being peers because we had different roles, but we weren't in a supervisory subordinate type of situation. So it was very, very, it was very friendly and very encouraging to be in that unit. Shout out to the 134th Air Control Squadron at McConnell. So,
awesome.
So I really did enjoy my enlistment, and obviously you're always going to have challenges, but nothing that I would not have balked at staying in that unit.
Yeah. So I was just thinking, because you said that they merged the career fields. I want to say the ground radio people, we used to call them ground rats, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And then what you did, well, so I was ComNav, airplane, right? JSTARS. And so I worked on SATCOM stuff. And I think we had this conversation like 14 years ago, but I don't know. I can't remember. It was a long time ago. I've slept since then. Sure. But yeah. And so don't they train out here at Keesler too? Or they did?
The initial training is for electronics principles, and that's done at Keesler. And then for SATCOM, I don't know if I think it's still at Fort Gordon. Well, it's not Fort Gordon anymore. It's Fort Eisenhower, Augusta, Georgia. Yeah, they changed the name with all the dynamics of changing names because of history. That fort got changed, but the signal corps for the Army is located out there in Augusta, and so the Air Force has a detachment there, and so in the Army, they would split up that Air Force career field into a couple different career fields. So they'd split up satellite and wideband. And so wideband and satellite both use like parabolic antennas, like when you see those dishes that people used to have out behind their houses. Yeah. So the difference is wideband is effectively pointing at another antenna over the Earth's surface. Right. So that'd be like if you have building to building, and you've got an antenna going across, that's a wideband signal.
Line of sight,
but
right.
If you just turn that and you point it straight up at the satellite, it's very, there's some differences, but for all intents and purposes, it's pretty much the same. So
yeah, so you were already in aerospace engineering. What caused you to shift to like working on things that make our food? That's like, I know, like, to me, because I'm not an engineer, it's like, oh yeah, there's like engineers that design these things. I don't know, they're all engineers, right? But for you, I'm sure there are nuances. But like, what are the things that drew you from aerospace into like food building?
Sure. Well, one, I love to eat. That always helps. When I was the aerospace industry has a lot of cycling. So you hear about layoffs, you hear about the industry kind of having ups and downs. And of course, like right now, we've got the issues with Boeing going through all that. So I feel for all my friends who either work at Spirit in Wichita or Boeing and all these companies that are impacted by the issues with the 737. So, so I was working in the aerospace industry right about the time that Boeing had a strike back in 2008. And so I got laid off from a job in 2009. Then I got laid off from another job in 2009. And I went to work for a company in St. Louis. And then, they were struggling. So they got rid of my position altogether. And so I was kind of in this like, okay, what do I want my career to be like? And I love designing machines, whether it's robotics or, manufacturing machines, 3D printers. I just love designing stuff that does stuff, and this company actually, this is like a God thing, really. My wife and I, I came home from my employment, my last day, came home, prayed with my wife, and you want to have that mental, like, just like fall down and weep and cry because I was literally, we had a 2-month-old baby at the time. So we had our 4-year-old son, actually, yeah, 4-year-old son and a 2-month-old baby. My wife was staying home with the kids. And so just the burden of that and, losing my job. And we were trying to navigate all the issues with, hadn't been able to sell our house in Wichita when we moved because of the economy collapse, because no one was buying.
Yeah, the bubble.
So then
right.
we turned it into a rental. So we were doing all these different things, and just all that burden. It's like I was 32 at the time and just struggling. So what I did was, I just said, you know what, my job now is just to find work, trying to figure out what that looks like. And sure enough, a headhunter called me out of the blue, like in 2 weeks, and said, hey, I got your name and number from this other guy. Apparently you guys used to work together. And he said, I think you might be a good fit for this job. And I looked at the paper, and I said, well, according to the job requisition, I am not a good fit because I didn't have all their needs. Like, they were like, well, we want someone with this specific experience. But we went ahead and submitted my resume anyway. And at first I was like, food, like, do I really want to be in food? And then my wife's actually the one who went to the company's website, and she goes, Brian, you got to go check this company out. And I was like, okay. So I went to their website, and I was like, dang, this is all like state of the art, automated machines. It's clean. It was pretty awesome. So they interviewed me, had me come out to Kansas City, and within a week they offered me a job and a start date, and I got the pay I was looking for.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a great experience.
Yeah, that's like, when it gets laid out like that for you, when you're like, you got all this stress and you're like trying to carry that, and then it gets all laid out for you like that, it's like, oh, this was meant to be, right?
Yeah.
But that was a relief. I mean, at 32, you're carrying all that stuff, but I think even at 42 or 52, that's a lot to carry.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, just the stress. I feel for people who, I know that right now we have a lot of people in our society who are dealing with dual incomes and navigating the ever increasing weight of inflation and just all the expenses around us are just getting more. We're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Our companies might not be giving us raises, or, and then we find out that something that we do as a family, like an activity, they're raising their rates. And all of a sudden it's like, you just see your finances shriveling up. And it's like, it's tough to navigate that. And especially when you're a single income family. And I feel for those people because I know the stress, and I have a lot more appreciation for my parents, and especially my own father, because I remember my dad working 2 jobs, and he'd work full time at one job and he made decent money, but just because of all the expenses of life, he took on a second job, and then, he would still do other stuff, and you didn't really hear him complain about it, right? You didn't hear him buckle. Now he had his own ways of coping with it and how he processed things. He wasn't as public of a guy as I am. So even now when we talk, he's, you can tell we have 2 different personalities, right? But no, I really appreciate all that he went through and navigated and walked through, and he didn't get on social media and gripe about it. He didn't throw wrenches at people and complain about his lot in life. He just went to work,
Yeah. Wow. This is a different generation too.
Yeah,
my dad, people say that I remind them of my dad. We have a lot of the same mannerisms, the same hairstyle. Thanks, Dad. But like,
I'm starting to get there.
But yeah, the generations before X, I think, were like, a lot more silent about what they were going through. Definitely.
Sure.
But so, how long were you in the food industry?
I was in it for 6 years.
Oh, so, wow. Yeah. Really flourished, huh?
Yeah. I mean, it was a lot of fun. And honestly, I still do some food in engineering now that I'm self-employed. So I have clients in that industry. And I still love, engineering solutions for it. It's just a little different because it's not my like 100% my day to day.
Okay.
When you work, so every industry has kind of like their nuance about why they think they're the best industry,
Yeah.
so, and people leverage that. They lean well, I guess I should say not every industry, but a lot of industries, they look at themselves and they want to lean on where they add value to society, like their core value. So food is like, that's obvious. Like everyone's got to eat,
Yeah.
So it's no different than, like medical. People need medical care, right? It's or you get into like construction, and like we build the world, like we build buildings, we build bridges. You couldn't drive without civil engineers, type of thing. And so everybody has their little nuance, and it's not to say that one industry is better than another, but there's something to be said. Like when I remember going into a food plant and working on a machine, then this machine was responsible for 100%. Like when you go buy these farmland diced cubed ham chunks in a bag,
Yeah.
like literally I was working on the machine that made all that. And it's like,
crazy.
yeah. And so it was just kind of cool. It's like, okay, my family eats the food that comes off this machine. So I have a motivation to make sure that this is the best dang machine I can produce. Right. Like, how can I make this a great machine? I'm not trying to figure out how I can cut corners and shave costs. I want it to be, because I want my family to feel comfortable and proud and everything else. And so, yeah, I mean, that was one of the things I really did love about being in that industry. And of course, our customers would send us food products to test on that machine. So,
Oh, wow.
and that was always fun. When a crate full like pepperoni would come through the door. So,
oh my goodness, that's
yeah.
nuts. So, what made you want to start up Quanta Engineering, your small business?
So, honestly, truth be told, I started that as a side hustle.
Okay.
So I was not anticipating going full time with Quanta.
Cool.
So I originally started it like towards the end of 2017, like started getting things going, bought, a domain and email domain, everything, and started getting things going. And then over the course of, the next 5 months, I saw my employment ending at my current employer. And I was actually interviewing with other companies, and just nothing was panning out. It's just, you got to find the right fit. And I just wasn't quite finding the right fit. I recognize that, it's easy to get discouraged if for those of you who listen to this and you're going through a shift in your life and you're trying to find employment, I want to encourage you not to give up just because you're not getting a job offer, right? So sometimes it just means you need to shift your focus on where you're looking or how you're looking. Don't be afraid to directly contact recruiters for companies, or if you're the type of person that really does want to start a business, like feel free to reach out to me. I can give you the lowdown on all the challenges that come with it. My business degree happens to be in entrepreneurship, so I was a little bit predisposed to this.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So, I will always be a small business owner. This is not my first business. I will always be a small business owner of some type, right? But I also recognize that there's certain things that I'm limited on by being in my position, because I can't easily navigate or take on large projects yet. Right. I don't have the team. I don't have the staff. So I network with other engineers, but I don't have like a team of 20 guys that I can take on, engineering the next, skyscraper. Right.
Right.
So, so with Quanta, it started off as intending to be a side hustle. And then when I left my job, it was kind of one of those situations where my company and my boss and I, we were not eye to eye. on things. And so it was kind of one of those things where it's like I had told him I was leaving, and then he told me, "Great, I want you gone." And then I said, "Fine, I'm gone." So, it was just there was a mutual, like, this is going to happen. We're no longer, and that's okay. That happens.
Yeah.
So I launched. I decided I'm going to go full time. Boom, it's done deal. And then the next week, I actually had a meeting with a company I had done some work for on the side, and boom, they needed me full time to do work. And so I hit the ground running, and since then I've added a couple dozen clients, and expanded licensing to multiple states, and yeah, it's been a lot of fun. We have our hiccups, so
yeah. So yeah, that just reminded me to put out the plug there that I put out like every week. Networking is important. I've seen people get their next job because they knew somebody, whether it was like somebody who is putting in a referral for them, and then then their resume gets looked at, or somebody from another company who worked with somebody, whatever, they come in, they're like, "Hey, we want you to come work for us." I've seen that too. And so I think your story emphasizes that as well. Like, networking, that's kind of a scary word for some people. It was scary for me a little bit. Well, it was scary for me a little bit, even though I'm an extrovert. And the reason why is because you're like putting yourself out there. It's like, here's me. And then some people go, "What?" And then it's like, "Oh, that was me," And so, you make yourself kind of vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
And then other people just like, they pretend like they don't hear you or whatever. So it's tough to be rejected. And that's like, I'm not even asking for anything. I'm just saying hi, and then people, want to reject me or whatever. And so that was a little bit tough. But I think once you start finding the right people to network with, I guess,
Sure.
and come into these like types of relationships where you're like, "Hey, I can help you in whatever way you want me to, or whatever way that I'm able to help you, for whatever you want, whatever." Then it's no longer you going, "Oh, here's me, accept me." It's like, "Hey, I can help you with something you voiced before," right?
Sure.
So then it becomes like mutual thing. So,
well, do you find it hard? Do you find it hard to network?
not anymore, no. Not anymore at all, really. I actually, it's kind of fun, actually. And so, like, being in data and having been in a bunch of different industries, worked in a bunch of different industries, as well as like working in consulting with a bunch of people in a bunch of different industries. I have this like network that's like it's like it's really spanned out, and so I meet all kinds of people, and often the people are like, "Hey, I'm in whatever career field, and I'm trying to go to another career field." Often it's data, some kind of data job, or a data field, data career, I guess.
Sure.
And so I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, what I like to do is I like to bring people together." So I'm like, "Hey, I know like a handful of people who are in that field or who are in that industry, or maybe one or two who may work for this company or whatever. Would you like to connect with them? I'll introduce you to them, this and that." And that's what I do. I love doing that.
Sure.
And because what I get out of it is just sometimes you see them posting anything like, "Hey, posting that I got a new job," and I'm like, "Oh, I connected them." Hey, it makes me feel
Nice.
good that I helped somebody. And it's not just helping the person get the job, but it's also the person who's looking to fill that position. Because I've been on those teams where somebody left and then we're like, "Oh, we're going to do more with less," which was like the Air Force thing, all those years ago. "We're going to do more with less." No, we're going to do the same. And then we're going to be stressed out more because we don't have enough people.
Sure.
So yeah, like helping people fill those positions or helping people find those positions, that's like one of my favorite things to do. which is,
Yeah.
I mean, really why we're here today, right?
Yeah.
Just trying to connect people and help
I
people
love that.
know there's a path to whatever career field they're trying to get into.
Well,
So,
I don't
yeah,
think that there's anything wrong with being intentional about making connections.
yeah,
Um, you know, I'll give you a scenario today. Um, a friend of mine reached out to me and asked me like, "Hey, I'm looking for some residential structural engineers." And I do a little bit of residential structural engineering, but I'm not, I'm not your go-to guy, right?
yeah,
So, I'm not the guy who's like all day long, every day I'm doing homes. I do a project every now and then. I know the codes. I work in the codes daily, so I do that. But like, so I reached out to a structural engineer I knew. I said, "Hey, do you know any residential structural engineers?" He goes, "No." Reached out to another one. "Hey, do you know any?" And he goes, "Hey, you know what? I do have a list. Let me pull it up." So he sent me this
mm,
list. I called each one of them, right? And so, boom. Hey, by the way, I know other than this project, I was like, "Hey, why don't we connect? Let's connect on LinkedIn. Like, I'll send you an email with my contact information. That way, if you ever need any help on anything, maybe I can help you. Or if you need references for something, let me
nice,
know." And it's
yeah,
like, "Oh yeah, sure." So it's like it's not bad to be intentional about choosing certain people you want to connect with. Um, I'm curious, Tito, like what would you say has been some of the challenges that you have seen people have, like why they don't want to network?
man. Then we talked about this, right? We talked about this. You're not supposed to ask me questions. Oh, okay.
Well, I
So
did.
no,
So,
this is
in all
no, this is
fairness,
fine.
no, but no, let me get this out. Like, in all fairness, I was at a business conference this last weekend, and
Yeah, I saw that.
the guy said, "Whoever asks the questions controls the conversation." So,
You're not
um,
controlling this, man. It's my show. No,
it's your podcast.
so
Take it away.
yeah, no, so like really people who are like hesitant to try to make connections are usually people who are new to a field or attempting to go into a field that they don't have any experience in.
Yeah,
Maybe they're working on it on the side, or they're in school or in a boot camp or something. They're just trying to like start building their network and they don't know exactly how to do it because it
sure.
sounds scary. Really, it's like, yeah, go talk to a bunch of people you don't know and you get some good information. It's like, how do I do that? How do I get from point A to point B? It's actually point A to like point Z, and there's a bunch of stuff in the middle. And so people are often hesitant because it's like a new concept to them, or it's like
Sure.
something that they've never put into practice before. And so anytime it's like, oh, this is new, like uncharted territory,
Yeah,
then people are going to have some kind of, hesitation. Yeah.
I agree.
So then I'm like, hey, connect with me and I'll connect you to somebody who may be able to help you. I can't promise that they'll help you, but I will promise that I can
Sure.
make an effort to connect you to them. And so, yeah, I've had people reach out who were in like completely different career fields than me. And they're like, yeah, if you've heard of anything. And I'm like, I can't make any promises. I don't know anybody in that field, but I may know somebody who knows somebody, and I'll look around and I'll get back to you. But yeah.
Well, it's this whole 6 degrees of separation,
Oh yeah,
right?
definitely.
Yeah, and I am not afraid. Like, I know someone who either is doing the thing that someone's looking for or
Yeah.
knows someone else. Like, it's just yeah, you just can't be afraid to reach out.
No, yeah.
And
Yep.
I recently had a young man who he's an engineering student, and I obviously I'm going to reference a lot of engineering stuff just because that's my primary. But this young man, he's asking about internships. He's like, he's got a great college job. He
Yeah.
works at the National Institute for Aviation Research. I mean, there's not. Oh, I mean, there's a ton of things you can do in college. Like, if you're in technical fields, if you're working at a research institute, like, that's a fantastic thing to have on your resume, right?
Oh yeah.
And so he's like, well, I'm looking for an internship in this industry, aerospace industry. And I'm looking for someone who can, direct me on where to get an internship. And at first my thought is like, well, you're already in the industry, so what are you looking for? But then I started talking to him. I was like, I noticed that you're not even connected to your own lab directors and stuff on
Oh,
LinkedIn.
no.
I was like, LinkedIn. I mean, and I know that you're on LinkedIn with this podcast, but
Yeah.
I'm going to share this to my Instagram. I'll share this to my Facebook. Hopefully to drive some action. But but the reality is like, goodness, like if you already have people that you're directly in contact with who have some connections with the people you need to be in contact with, it doesn't take anything other than a quick phone call or an email.
Right.
And you just say, hey, listen, I'm trying to connect. Like, if I can, I'll share. I don't want this to come across as bragging because, it's not. But when I started Quanta and I was trying to grow my presence, grow my customer base, I literally would go to Google Maps. I would pan over a city and I would just search for manufacturers and different keywords. I would take all those company names, I'd put them in a spreadsheet, and then I'd go to LinkedIn and I would look up that company, try to figure out who owned the company, who was the directors, this and that. And then I would be like, okay, do we have anybody in common? Great. If we do, I'd reach out to that person. I'd be like, hey, can you make an introduction?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I'm not afraid to ask. It's like, what's the worst that happens? It's like, if you're an acquaintance of mine and you say no, it's like, okay, well, I'm no worse off than I was beforehand.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
You didn't lose anything.
I didn't lose anything. But if they say yes, and that company says, yeah, sure, I'd love to talk to Brian. Well, then boom, I'm already one step closer to having a relationship with that company. And then, I mean, a little bit creepy, but I went so far as like I found people who like had some names I recognized, like, okay, like these are names that like are family names. So I'm like looking up on ancestry.com, like in this county here in Kansas, like, is this person like a third cousin of mine? Because I'm like, I mean, I call
that's creepy. No, I'm joking.
No, I mean,
you gotta do what you gotta do.
But the point is you want to go to be a master networker. I think you have to become an expert at becoming someone's short-term best friend. Right?
Interesting.
And so, and part of that is you have to figure out what's the most effective way to warm up a cold interaction.
Yeah.
And so I know we're talking about me a lot, but like as we talked before we got on the podcast, like I've become very hyper focused on trying to figure out how best I can ask questions of the other person to extract from them information that one, they want to talk about, right? And then relate to them in a way by asking them more questions, and not asking them questions so that then I can share my story and relate to them. Like they say, oh yeah, I a family farming. And then I say, oh yeah, I grew up family farming. And it's like, well, then I just stole their thunder.
Yeah.
Right. But I might just ask some questions like, oh, well, don't you love it when cattle do this? Or, and then that kind of clues them in. It's like, oh, this guy knows a little bit about what I did and he can appreciate this. And so I think so many people are afraid. They're afraid of little rejections. And those little rejections, I've said this before. I think we suffer from an epidemic of lack of self-confidence, and it's so bad that even the little no's, we won't do something. We allow ourselves to become paralyzed, or we eliminate, we prejudge and then eliminate an opportunity because we're afraid of a little no.
Yeah. No, that's true. And it's funny, like you were talking about like tracking people down, this and that, use maliciously, all those things that you said, used maliciously, that's called social engineering, but otherwise it's networking, right?
I don't do anything illegal.
I can tell you
public information.
I can tell you that I have gone on LinkedIn before, and you know how like if you look at somebody's page, like they get an alert, they get a notification, so-and-so looked at your page or whatever, your profile. I have gone to companies that like I wanted to work for, and then looked for people with the same the same job title as maybe the position that I was to apply for.
Sure.
And then I'd look for their managers or their directors, and then I'd go look at their profiles.
Yeah.
And so then they're looking at my profile. They're like, "Who's this guy who's looking at me? Oh, he is hyper qualified."
Yeah,
I've done that, and I have like network connections to like, a bunch of people in different companies that I never ended up working for, but I'm like, I see their stuff popped up on my feed, and I'm like, can I connect to this person again? And I was like, oh, that's right, they work for whatever company. And then I looked at their whole team. I looked at all of their profiles, and then like it seems like 30 to 50% of the people that you look at, if you have some type of like interest, if you have like qualifications, if they're looking for somebody like you, they will look at your profile. It's the craziest thing. It's crazy.
Well, do you go so far as to actually like or comment on their posts?
Yes.
Their content? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So for those of you who are listening in, like if you want to improve algorithms to leverage your LinkedIn presence or social media presence, maybe LinkedIn will give me a free or a cheap or a free premium account for a year. But no, so you literally, if you go to someone's wall or their page on LinkedIn, and you can see if their account is set up to where their posts are public, you can see their posts. You can see what they've reacted to. So, and if they've reacted to like, if you look at a CEO and he's posted on someone's page and he said, "Congrats, so and so," like, feel free to wish that person a congratulations. Like, I comment on a lot of young engineers' posts when they post things about like, I graduated college or I just got my first job. Like, by all means, congratulations. Well done.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know you, but still kudos. That's worthy of me giving you a kudo. I'm not going to comment on something really that's more private. That's not probably appropriate, but that kind of stuff, because then, those people who you're trying to get in front of, they might see some of that commentary. And plus, when you like their stuff, obviously it shows up. They see that you like their stuff. They're like, "Oh, who is this Yahoo?" And then they say, "Oh, he's a ginger German." And they come to my page and I'm like I said, I'm like this Renaissance guy. Like people ask me all the time. They're like, you talked earlier about how when people see engineers, like, I don't view engineering so much as compartmentalized between like this industry with this segment, and it's really siloed. I try to find the analogs that go between them.
Oh yeah.
So, I look at things and I say, okay, force is still force regardless of where you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So physics is still physics. Energy is still energy. So how do you relate those things? So knowing how, a structural code applies versus the Code of Federal Regulations for aerospace versus the American Meat Institute for food processing, at the end of the day, like the actual engineering behind it, the nuances are relatively small. So it's just understanding that, if I'm going to apply force to a material, it's going to move at some point. And that doesn't matter if that material is in a building, a house, a train, a tractor, a car, a food machine. Stainless steel is still stainless steel.
Wow. Yeah. So that's interesting. Yeah, that's definitely a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
So
and even with money, like, let me share this with you. So even with money, so obviously I already have a blend between engineering and business, right? That was my background. And I kind of came up in a little bit of a mix of that already. My mom was a financial professional. My dad was not, but my grandfather was an engineer. So, I grew up around engineering. And the reality is, like, in money, what would you say is like the most common term you hear people talk about when it comes to money and investments, things like that?
Money and investments, like common term? At this age, it's like retirement. I was trying to save up for retirement.
And so to get to retirement, you want your money to compound. right?
Oh,
So
right. Yeah.
compound interest. That's the magic. There's a quote that's often associated or attributed to Einstein where he talked about something about the magic of compounding interest and how you can take, a little bit of money and then it magically transforms into a lot of money.
Yeah.
And in reality, there's actually an analog with engineering because, when we look at, say, a piece of material that's cantilevered, it's hanging out, right? So if you have a short beam, that short beam can hold a lot of weight. It doesn't move a whole lot. It doesn't deflect, right? But as you move it further out and it extends further and further, not only does it have to support the weight that you put on it, but it has to support its own weight. And the formulas that we use to calculate those movements, the stress, the displacement, those are exponential relationships. The force compounds.
Yeah.
And so,
okay.
so it's like, for me, it's like, how do you find those details? If you're talking about food processing, talking about compounding, a little bit of bacteria compounds. It grows as an exponential rate. So, so the more you can find those kind of analogs between different industries, the more it just makes sense to you.
Yeah.
And
oh yeah. Oh, that reminds me of something that I've had several conversations about, where people are coming from one totally different industry going into another totally different industry, and they're like, I can't bring any of my experience. I'm like, actually, you absolutely can. Everything that you've done in your life can be applicable to the next thing you're going to do in your life.
Absolutely.
You just have to know how to you have to know how to say it in a way that the people in the new place are going to understand the value that you're bringing from your old place. It's just, it's just like, it's communication translation. That's the thing. When I got out of the military, I thought I had the greatest resume. I see pieces of it now, like on my old computer. Yep.
Sorry, my wife just got home with the kids, and so things are a little bit chaotic.
Oh yeah, don't worry about it, man. We're gonna end pretty soon, but yeah, the thing is, like, with my resume, my old resume, my very first resume, I thought it was awesome. It was awful because there was nobody who could understand what in the world I did in the Air Force, and it's like, how does working on missiles or working on airplanes or having an office job as an analyst in the training squad, or not squadron, the second Air Force at Keesler, how does that all translate to data analysis? And I'm like, I don't know. So if you could give anybody who is thinking about a shift in their career any, like, maybe a short paragraph of advice, what would that be?
Oh, that's a good question. It's a great question. So, I think one of the most critical things that people need to self-evaluate, right, is what do they expect of themselves? Where do they expect them to be, right? And I'm not just talking about your career. I'm talking about like we talked earlier about the multiple factors. Like, where do you expect to be with your relationship with your spouse? Where do you expect with your relationship with your children? Are there goals that you have? If I don't want to get all like motivational speakerish on people, but the reality is, if you don't identify the goals that you want to accomplish, like I shared some of them on Facebook recently about, like, I've got some licensing I want to pursue, I've got some growth I want to have, and I have goals for that in multiple areas of my life. And then of course I also have goals for my spouse and I, like where I want us to be, like us to be able to do more dating of a certain type, or be able to take more vacations together, to have those kinds of memories, things like that. So, like, find out what those goals are, right? And then when you look at your transitions, how do those transitions serve those goals?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So if you're going to transition just to transition, it could work out. It could also be disastrous.
Yeah.
right? So, there were very strategic reasons why I rejoined the Air National Guard, right? Now, some people, when I go into depth and I kind of explain it all, I'm not going to do that here. But when I did that, some of my friends were like, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. I was like, yeah, it does make sense if you know the backstory. But when they're like, wow, you're kind of an old guy to go back in the military. I was like, yeah, but that's okay. I'm 44, but I'm still pretty fit. I compete in strongman. I work out 6 days a week. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I don't, I'm kind of a square guy when it comes to that kind of stuff. I'm very cognizant of what I eat. But when you transition, like, what is that transition for? Like, is there a purpose, right? And so as you look at that, and then it's a matter of just breaking down those steps, because regardless of whatever transition in life or goal you have, you can define it however you want to, but there's always going to be those intermediate little steps along the way. And you can take it as detailed as you want. You can take it down to, okay, I'm going to accomplish this little step, and it's like a week-long step. Or you can say, okay, I'm going to take that and break it down even further into daily steps, into hourly steps, however you want to take it. The more you consciously break it down, the easier it will be for you to accomplish. So you do the hard work up front of breaking it down. Okay. It's just like if you were to go like make a dessert out of almond bark chocolate, and you start off and you got a big old brick of chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, starting with that, trying to just work with that's difficult, right? But if I can break it down into smaller chunks, I can handle those smaller chunks. I can deal with those smaller chunks. And even like melting that little bit of chocolate, the smaller the pieces of chocolate I have to start off with, the quicker it goes, the more, and then I get the progress growing, and I get that momentum building. Huh?
Yeah. Quick wins.
Yeah. And so, and then make sure you celebrate them. So now as far as transition goes, like I would definitely make sure like this is going to look different for everybody. It's going to look different for whether you're married with children in the home, out of the home, whether they're young or old. All those things have an impact. And I would just caution anybody, don't make transitions solely for yourself, right? We live in a culture where people have become very self-serving and very self-focused. So you have to, you may have seen me say this before, but I'm speaking to the husbands now. So as husbands, like when you transition in life or whatever you're doing, like you got to make sure your wife is on board, right? Not just that your wife is on board, but you got to know what your wife's goals and dreams are. So if your goal or transition that you're trying to do, if that is in direct conflict with your wife's goals, you got to take a step back and just determine whether or not that's a legit transition.
Yeah.
So does that make sense?
Yeah. Good stuff. All right. So man, it's been good catching up with you after all these years. Glad you came on, and man, I'm looking forward to our dinner. Now I'm thinking, you're somebody who's very cognizant of what you eat, but you realize that you're coming to the Mississippi Gulf Coast where everything is fried. So we're gonna have to think.
It's okay to have deviation.
I'm gonna have to be creative with what I come up with here.
Oh, I'll eat fried food. I'm just not going to eat it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Oh, okay. Well, okay, that's fine. Cool. Sounds good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll see you in the studio when I end the stream. Don't go anywhere. But everybody else, man, thanks for joining us. Next week we have Brandon Burns. See, this time, like almost every week, I go, oh, I don't remember who's coming on, but I looked at the calendar before we went live today, and Brandon Burns, the former CB. And this guy, he was actually supposed to be my guest for week 4, but we had a communication breakdown, happens now and then, and I ended up being my own guest. And I don't want to be my own guest again. So let's, when I post that, the announcement for the next event for Brandon, please everybody comment on it because I'm tagging him in it. And so then he'll just keep getting those notifications and go, oh, I have something to do next Monday evening. So anyway, it was great having a conversation with you. I'll see you guys. If anybody has any questions about like changing your career, going into engineering, or going from one job to another, like has to do with engineering or small business or financial, advisorship. I don't know what you call that, analysis advisors, whatever.
Advising.
Yeah. Connect with him. Shoot him a message here on LinkedIn or comment on YouTube or Facebook, wherever you are. All right. I'll see you guys. Ending the stream now. Have a good one.